So because you guys are in my college class, you guys will learn a little bit more than the regular pre-cal kids when it comes to inverses. There's also like one more cool little trick that I haven't shown you guys yet that we'll do in this section. So this is basically just like a part 2 to the inverses section. So you guys will find the exact values of expressions involving inverse, sine, cosine, and tangent. Exact means no decimals. Define and evaluate expressions involving cosecant inverse, secant inverse, and cotangent inverse. We're practicing our calculator again today. And then we'll learn how to write trig expressions as algebraic expressions. So this is something that we actually practice. This is a calculus skill that you guys will learn today. All right, so we're going to start. You guys just have one box, right, for these notes? Okay, we're going to start with a problem. So we're going to Okay, not a trick question. What's different here than what you guys saw in 3.1? It's sine and tangent, right? Are these the same trig function? No. Okay, so ideally it'd be nice if they're the same, right? Because then we could cancel these. Okay, so another question I want to ask you guys is 1/2 one of our numbers on the unit circle for sine, cosine, or tangent? It is, but is it for tangent? No. Okay, so, what am I going to do? Well, we are going to be clever. Whenever we do these problems, remember the answer to this is some angle. So, can we think about this as this right here is just theta? So really in this problem, I'm just finding the sine of theta. Okay, so I'm going to let theta equal the tangent inverse of 1/2. Which means that I can think about this now as this is the same thing as the tangent of theta is 1/2. These two lines in teal and blue mean the same thing. Okay, so my goal is to figure out what theta is because then I'm just finding the sine of that. Does that make sense? So what I want to do is I'm not going to use my calculator because I want to find the exact value. So what I want you guys to do is think about back to chapter 2. Remember, we can use this and this to draw a triangle. Okay, what I have to remember though is this really means tangent inverse. Is tangent inverse, is this positive or negative, this number right here? It's positive, right? It's positive 1/2. So I'm going to draw my quadrants. When we talked about tangent inverse last week, you guys can flip back if you guys need to. Between which two angles am I allowed to use tangent inverse? Good. Negative pi over 2 and pi over 2, right? So you guys agree that it's this region and this region, right? So I'm only allowed to pick numbers that are in these two quadrants. So remember, we said this was positive, right? Right, guys? So if I think about this, all students take calculus, not consumer math. Calculus, all students take calculus. Get it? Because that starts with a C too. Get it? Which one of these is tangent positive? Quadrant 1 or quadrant 4? Quadrant 1. So I'm going to draw this in quadrant 1. So I'm going to draw my right triangle. Remember, tangent is what over what? Opposite over adjacent. So opposite of theta is 1. Adjacent to theta is 2. And I need to find this because what we're going towards, if you guys are confused, like what are we doing? Our goal is to find the sine of theta, right? Don't we have a triangle now? Remember, sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So if I know what the hypotenuse is and just do the sine, I have my answer. That's what you're looking for. Okay, so I can use Pythagorean theorem. X squared plus y squared. So x is 2. So 2 squared plus 1 squared is r squared. So 4 plus 1 is r squared. So 5 is equal to r squared. Can the radius be negative? No. So r is just equal to square root of 5. Okay, is everybody okay? Cool. All right, so remember, what are we finding now? We're finding which trig function? Sine. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So all this becomes is the sine of theta, which is going to be opposite over hypotenuse, which is, if I rationalize, it's going to give me what? Square root of 5 over 5. So that's my answer. And just let's hopefully be okay with that idea. Exact value, guys, if I ever ask you guys that and your homework asks you that, that means no decimals. So I want something like this, okay? All right. Remember, I told you guys I don't want you guys to use a calculator. But on your test, quiz, whatever, this is a problem that is a calculator question. And this is why. We could type this into our calculator. Do you guys think this is going to give me a pretty number? No. So go ahead and do that. Ask your calculator, what is the sine of tangent inverse of 1/2? Did you guys get that? Okay. And what was our answer that we got? So check this out. That's how you check it. Okay, so that being said, I'm not going to ask you guys like find something in your answers point or 1/2, because what is 1/2 as a decimal? 0.5. I won't ask you guys that because then you guys, if you guys put in your calculator, it tells you 0.5. You guys are going to know that's 1/2. I'm going to give you guys something crazy where you have to do the triangle to figure it out. Okay, because even myself, I don't know that that's that by heart. I have no idea. I just work here. I don't know. Okay. But ideally, just understand, I'll even put it in your directions. Check your answer with a calculator. Okay. So this is like an easy case because which quadrant were we in? We're in quadrant 1. Okay, so let's do one that's a little bit trickier. So B I want us to find the cosine of sine inverse of negative 1/3. Question? Yeah. Okay, so this is the only time you guys do this process. So the way that you know to do this is, are these the same trig function? Like this is cosine, this is not cosine inverse, that's what I mean. One's sine, one's cosine, so this is when you know to draw the triangle. So same idea, think about this as theta. So I'm trying to find the cosine of theta when I'm done with this problem, okay? So we're gonna say let theta be sine inverse of negative 1/3, because what that means is then I could rewrite this like this. The sine of theta is equal to negative 1/3. Is everyone cool with how I went from here to here? That makes sense? Okay, so since we're dealing with sine inverse and it's negative, so I have to think about, okay, well, what two quadrants am I allowed to use for sine inverse? Quadrant 1 and quadrant 4, okay? So sine inverse of x is also between negative pi over 2 and pi over 2. So I have to pick something here. Now, since we're only here or here, guys, if sine's negative, is sine negative in quadrant 1? No, right? So that means I must draw my triangle here. So I have to draw it in quadrant 4. Is everybody okay so far? All right, so let's make sure that we don't do this too fast. Sine is what over what? What goes on top? Opposite over hypotenuse, right? So because it's negative, make sure when you do the opposite side, isn't the y going down? Okay, so this side's gonna be negative 1, and then my hypotenuse is gonna be 3, so I need to solve for x. So x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. So x squared plus negative 1 squared is equal to 3 squared. Three squared is 9. So x squared is equal to 8. Is x going to be positive or negative? Positive because I'm going that way, right? If you break down 8 using a factor tree, you guys should get 2 square root 2. Okay, questions so far? Are we okay? All right, so what am I finding? I'm finding the cosine of this triangle now. So cosine is what over what? Adjacent over hypotenuse. So cosine of theta in this problem is going to be 2 square root 2 over 3. Does that simplify anymore? It does not. So this is my answer. And then I already showed you guys a cool little trick. Make sure that you guys, on a test, whatever, you check with the calculator. Okay, questions on B. No? And I want to tell you guys too, I really like these problems. So whenever I tell you guys that, what does that mean? It's going to be on your test. This for sure is going to be on your test because this is a cool little, it's kind of like a puzzle. Trying to figure out like, oh, where is it? Oh, what is it? Oh, that's cool. Oh, it worked. Nice. Okay, let's do one more. I'm having too much fun. Tangent of cosine inverse of -3/7. Okay, so let's kind of like simulate like your tests. Right now, what I would do if I were you on a test, is the first thing I would do is I would type all this into my calculator so I know what decimal I'm aiming for. So go ahead and do that. Ask your calculator, what is a tangent of cosine inverse of this number? Yeah, go ahead. All right, is everybody good? Check yours. Did you guys get -2.108? Okay. So same idea, different trig functions. So we're going to think about this whole parentheses as theta. So theta is equal to cosine inverse of -3/7, which means that cosine of theta is equal to -3/7. So for cosine inverse, guys, which two quadrants do we live in if we're cosine inverse? 1 and 2, because it's between 0 and pi, okay? So we can think about this as 0, think about this as pi. Cosine inverse is these two quadrants. So if cosine is supposed to be negative, which quadrant do I draw my triangle? Quadrant 2. And this should make sense because let's do it like, let's think ahead. What did my calculator tell me? Positive or negative? Negative. Is tangent negative here? No, so I have to be quadrant 2. Does that make sense? Because tangent's also negative in quadrant 2. Okay? All right. Cosine of theta is adjacent over hypotenuse. So since x is going this way, that means my x is negative and my radius is always positive. So the 7's positive. So in this problem, I'm finding y. So x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. -3 squared plus y squared is equal to 7 squared. Okay, so this one we need to do a factor tree. I'm going to do it with you guys just for practice. Anybody, give me two numbers. 4 times 10. What's 4 the same as? 2 and 2, so I have a pair right there. 10 is the same thing as 2 and 5, but do I have an extra 2 to pair up with this 2 that hasn't been used already? Do I have an extra 5? So where do these numbers go? Inside, what do I do with them? Multiply. What's 2 times 5? 10. So y is equal to 2 square root 10. Since y is going up, positive or negative? Positive. Okay. All right. So that was the hard part. So now, therefore, the tangent of theta is equal to opposite over adjacent. So opposite of theta is 2 square root 10 over 3. I'm just going to put the 3 on the negative on top. Now, ask your calculator, not what the tangent of this is, just type your number into your calculator. And it should be, if you didn't clear your calculator, it should be the same number, the negative 2.10 whatever. And that should be a good feeling, especially on a test. You're like, yes, because you know for sure you got it right? And if it's not correct, that means you made a mistake somewhere. Okay, questions? All right, cool. All right, so the only box we have for this lesson is definitions for secant, cosecant, and cotangent. Okay, so just bear with me, guys. We're going to write a little bit. So y is equal to secant inverse of x means that x is equal to the secant of some angle y, where the absolute value of x is greater than or equal to 1, and y is between 0 and pi, where y is not equal to pi over 2. I will not ask you guys this on a test. Like, what's the domain of secant inverse? I won't ask you guys that. Hopefully this makes sense though, because what's the reciprocal of secant? Cosine. Remember, cosine is between quadrants 1 and 2. So it's the same domain pretty much, the same range pretty much, but the only thing is the cosine of pi over 2 is 0. If I flip that upside down, I get undefined. So that's why we have that, okay? So these are going to have similar kind of traits. So y is equal to cosecant inverse of x means that x is equal to the cosecant of y, where x, the absolute value of x, is greater than or equal to 1, and negative pi over 2 is less than or equal to y, which is less than or equal to pi over 2, and y cannot be 0. Do you guys know why we have this part? If you don't, it's okay. Remember, what's the graph of secant look like? Doesn't it look like something like that? Isn't this 1? Isn't this -1? What's the absolute value of -1? 1. That's why we have that. Okay, same thing for cosecant. The only thing is this is shifted over just a little bit. This is just shifted over a little bit. Okay. What's the reciprocal of cosecant? Sine. So the reason why we have this is because what's the sine of 0? 0. So that means the cosecant of 0 is undefined. Okay, so that's why we have that. All right, last one, cotangent. Y is equal to cotangent inverse of x means that x is equal to the cotangent of y, where x is between -infinity to infinity should actually move this here because that's you can't. Okay, so for the inverses of the reciprocal functions, so we have secant inverse of x, cosecant inverse of x, and cotangent inverse of x. It's important to know the properties of the graphs as the basis for these definitions and their domain and range. So that's what I was talking about. But like I told you guys, I'm not going to ask you guys this on your tests. Trust me, when you guys are done with chapter 3, you guys will have enough to kind of study and have on your plates. So this is just, as a college student in this class, this is just a bonus that I'm showing you guys what this is. Okay, so let's do some practice. So example. And I forgot to change this. Sorry, guys. Don't copy this part. My bad. So we're going to find exact values of inverse trig functions. Okay, so something like this, again, exact values. So do I want decimals? No. So the way that we can think about this is, I'm writing in a different color for a reason. So this is the problem. I'm going to write in green that this is just really equal to theta. So the green wouldn't be given to you. That's just something that I want you guys to think about. The answer to this is some angle on the unit circle. Okay? I don't know about you guys, but I don't have my cosecants and my secants and my tangent or my cotangents memorized. But what I do hope that you guys will have memorized is your sine, cosines, and tangents, right? Do you guys agree that cosecant is the same thing as the reciprocal of sine? So what this is really asking is, this right here is the same thing as sine inverse of, what's the reciprocal of 2? 1/2. So whatever the answer to this problem is the same angle. Does that make sense? So I have to think about, okay, well, now my brain has to shift back to sine. Which 2 quadrants am I allowed to live in for sine inverse? 1 and 4. Good. Where this is pi over 2, and this is negative pi over 2. So this value is positive, right? So which quadrant am I allowed to choose in, 1 or 4? Quadrant what? 1, right? So which angle in the unit circle is the sine of that value a half? Is it pi over 6, pi over 4, or pi over 3? Pi over 6. Good. And the way you can think about it too, guys, is this a very large number? Which one of these has the smallest y value? Aren't the y's getting bigger as I'm going up? So this is the smallest one, so it's 1/2. This is 1/2, root 2 over 2, root 3 over 2, 1. The cosines start big, and do you guys agree as I'm going up this way, aren't the x's getting more close to 0? So the x's are getting smaller. That's really what's happening. So this is root 3 over 2 comma 1/2. But since we want the sine, we want this guy. So my angle is pi over 6. Okay. B. So remember, this is equal to some theta, okay? But am I really going to be thinking about secant, or what should I be thinking about? Cosine, right? Cosine, and then what am I going to do with this number? Flip it, do the reciprocal. So this really means the cosine of theta is equal to the reciprocal, so it's going to be 1 over the square root of 2, but it's negative. Let's rationalize it. Good. Good job. So it'd be negative root 2 over 2. So I'm trying to find the angle on my unit circle that gives me a cosine value of this number. But since we're dealing with cosine inverse, remember, which two quadrants can we use for cosine inverse? 1 and what? 1 and 2. Good. So this is 0. This is pi. Cosine inverse, I'm allowed to live in here. Okay. So if I'm thinking about all students take calculus, since this is negative, am I in quadrant 1? No, I must be in quadrant 2, okay? We just have to think about which of these angles, the top one, the middle one, or the bottom one, is going to give me the negative root 2 over 2. Do you guys know? The middle one? What angle is in the middle in this quadrant? 3 pi over 4. Good job, guys. So this angle right here, our theta, it's going to be 3 pi over 4. Did any of you guys study the flashcards over the weekend? No? Can you guys please study them? Please? Just trust me, when you guys are in college, I'm looking at all you seniors. When you guys are in college, you guys will thank me. By knowing this by heart, you guys will thank me. If you guys have to take calculus. Okay. Do we have time for C? Let's just write it down, then we'll start here whenever we decide this is something we want to do again. All right, so this is going to be part C, and this is where we'll pick up on Wednesday.